Hello everyone. My topic for the persuasive speech assignment is the dark side of domestic violence, emotional and psychological abuse. The purpose of my persuasive speech is to persuade my audience to recognize emotional and psychological abuse as equally, if not more damaging than physical abuse, and to encourage support for survivors. Domestic violence is not only physical. Emotional and psychological abuse can destroy a woman's mental and emotional well-being, and society must learn to recognize and support survivors of these invisible wounds. Most people assume domestic violence only counts when there are visible bruises or injuries. But what if the real damage is invisible, slowly destroying someone from the inside out? Anyone listening to me now may know someone silently suffering emotional abuse. Understanding the invisible side of domestic violence allows us to support those who are too afraid to speak. I speak from personal experience. I lived through emotional and psychological abuse. I was married for 25 years. I grew up thinking that abuse was just physical. So when the emotional and psychological abuse started, I didn't know what was happening to me. I noticed that my personality and a lot of things started to decline. But because the abuse wasn't physical, I didn't know what was happening to me. I found out I was being emotionally and psychologically abused in my 22nd year of marriage. I eventually left in my 23rd year of marriage. I also joined an online support group for women where I witnessed countless stories of women who had gone through trauma without physical abuse. And the long-lasting effects a lot of them went through still lingers with them even till now. Domestic violence goes far beyond physical harm. Emotional and psychological abuse can even be more devastating, and survivors need to be believed, they need support, and they need understanding. Emotional and psychological abuse is often misunderstood and minimized. Emotional abuse can cause deeper and long-lasting effects than physical abuse. We must support survivors of non-physical abuse with compassion and action. I would now like to go through the different points around this topic. Emotional and psychological abuse is often misunderstood and minimized. Forms include manipulation, gaslighting, isolation, threats, financial control, and constant humiliation. At this point, I would also like to add reactive abuse. After a while, you start to react to the abuse, and it almost starts to look like you are the abuser instead of the victim. Society often tells survivors just to leave or dismisses their pain because there are no physical bruises. I was told to lower my expectations. I was told, but he's not beating you, so what is the problem? I was silently crying out for help in different ways, but because there was no physical manifestation of the abuse, no one took me seriously. Nearly 48% of women report experiencing psychological aggression by a partner, and this is from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Women in my support group often said that their emotional wounds lasted far longer than any physical injury. As a result of emotional abuse, I became extremely anxious. At some point, I needed sleeping pills to be able to sleep. I attempted suicide twice. I became a shadow of my old self. I lost my voice. I was always crying. And at some point, I was actually going online to look for ways to kill myself without going through a lot of pain. And while all this was happening, I really had no one to talk to. Emotional abuse can have deeper and long-lasting effects than physical abuse. It damages self-esteem, it creates confusion, and it traps victims in fear and self-doubt. At some point, I almost started to believe that I was imagining a lot of things that were happening to me. Emotional abuse is also linked to anxiety, depression, PTSD, and suicidal thoughts. I became suicidal because I felt trapped, dismissed, and unsupported while trying to escape my abusive relationship. I eventually left in 2022. This is 2025. My family is still not talking to me because they still do not believe I was abused. Knowing all this, we must take action to help those trapped in emotional cycles of abuse. We must support survivors of non-physical abuse with compassion and understanding. Believe survivors without requiring physical evidence. At some point, I almost started to wish that he had also been hitting me, because I was almost convinced that if I had physical scars, maybe then my family would have listened to me. Offer emotional support, safety planning, and consistent check-ins. Avoid blaming the victim. Focus on the abuser's behavior. I realized that even the court system does not understand emotional and psychological abuse. The best places to actually get support are from people who have gone through it themselves. Even going for therapy does not necessarily work, especially when you are dealing with a therapist who does not understand emotional and psychological abuse. A supportive network can be life-saving for someone trapped in emotional abuse. After I left the marriage, because I was still in the same environment with my abuser, I realized that post-separation abuse was happening. The only way I ended up finally freeing myself from my abuser was to leave the country. I had to leave the country to escape. Domestic violence is not just about physical harm. Emotional and psychological abuse can leave deeper, long-lasting scars. To truly fight domestic violence, society must recognize invisible abuse and support those who suffer silently. Please, if you encounter a woman who says she's been abused, whether they are bruises or not, believe her, support her, and give her your empathy and understanding. That could save her life. Thank you.